Hello, everyone. My name is Jax West, and I run Stephen Avery Project as well as our subgroups, MAM Gossip, and then we've got Justice with Jax as well. Or I have Justice with Jax. Ooh, let me get comfortable. So, today is our online holiday rally, which is the brainchild of one of our moderators here, Christopher. So he came up with this as a way of, sup, Tamara, showing support for both Stephen and Brendan. He's given me, hello, Jillian. He's given me somewhat of a list to follow, to just talk about the case and why we're here, and so much more. Right now, he's got a schedule that it is 9 a.m. I'm not. Yeah, I'm kind of tired, Denise. I didn't sleep well last night. Um. So right now, this video is scheduled to be from. It is 9 a.m. Central Time, my time, until noon. So 3 hours for this video. And then there would be a lunch break for an hour, and then Christopher is going to come on with me after that. Um, Let me see. Let me scroll back in what he's got here. All right. So he says, why we're doing this rally, as I was just saying, Christopher wanted to bring awareness to both of the guys' cases during this holiday time, also during this COVID time, that it makes it really hard to schedule any kind of in person rally, right? So, and we did do the one this past summer that was in person. So, when you do it online, you're able to have people from all around the world be part of it, not just the ones that are able to get to Wisconsin. Um where the case stands now. So, Kathleen last filed. Sometimes it's muted, is what Travis is saying. I don't know about that. There's nothing I can do about that, Travis. Sorry, I'll try and speak up louder if people are having a hard time hearing me. But Kathleen last filed June 25th of this year. So you can go to her website, which I'm going to do right now on my other screen. Because what we're going to do is we're going to go over first where Stephen's case is now. I'm assuming if you are on Stephen Avery Project, you don't need an overview of the case itself, that you all know what Stephen's case is about. So you could go to here. I'm just going to click on it right now. Here's the link to where you can read Kathleen's last brief. All right, but we're going to go over this brief, but I'm not going to read the entire thing like I've done in the past. If you want to hear the entire thing, that you don't have the time to read it yourself, because I know sometimes it's easier for people to just listen, like if you're driving in a car or something. We do have a video from when this first came out, when we read the entire thing. But so this is the brief that Kathleen filed in June that we are still waiting for the court to rule on. And there is no time limit. So we don't know when we'll get movement on this. As you see, it was filed at the end of June. So, and we're still waiting. But let me read the introduction. And a lot of what's in this brief is, in order to have something overturned, or new trial, what have you. You have to find something in our law that shows this has happened before. So a lot of this brief is a lot of legal stuff, a lot of different cases that they're referring to, all that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into any of that. So let's just read the introduction right now. Steven Avery has spent, now remember this is as of June 25th, 5,343 days, which would be 128,232 hours, behind bars for his second wrongful conviction. He has endured the mental anguish of knowing that he is innocent, and his constitutional rights to a fair trial were violated. The state, in a desperate effort to keep Mr. Avery imprisoned, devotes 104 pages to arguing that Mr. Avery's claims are procedurally barred. See, again, you have to show that this has happened in another case in order for them to attribute it to yours, which I don't know. I'm not a legal mind, and don't pretend to be. So I don't like that. Anyway, and let me say again, because I'm sure we're going to get comments from people saying, why am I reading this? This isn't new. It's because we're talking about where the case stands now. So, of course, we have to go back to where the last filing was. So, back to reading. However, the state ignores the most important undisputed fact that refutes its entire argument that Mr. Avery is procedurally barred from bringing his new claims. There was an agreement on September 18, 2017, between the state and Mr. Avery that Mr. Avery could amend his June 2017 974.06 motion without opposition from the state, perform additional scientific testing, and schedule a 4-week evidentiary hearing if needed. Proof of the agreement is evidenced by the undisputed fact that the state did not object to Mr. Avery's October 6, 2017 motion to vacate the October 3rd, 2017 court order dismissing his June 2017 motion. The circuit court also recognized that the state and Mr. Avery had made an agreement as described above. Because of the undisputed agreement between Mr. Avery and the state that he could amend his June 2017 motion, all the state's current arguments about Mr. Avery being procedurally barred are waived, and the state should be stopped from raising the procedural bar arguments. The circuit court orders are replete with legal errors, as the state points out in state's brief 17, 20, we don't need to read all those. Because of its legal errors, the circuit court failed to address many of the issues Mr. Avery raised, so there is no record for this court to determine whether the circuit court erroneously exercised its discretion. In fact, it is an erroneous exercise of discretion to fail to exercise discretion over multiple issues. Alternatively, if this court engages with the state's arguments, Mr. Avery presents sufficient reasons why his claims are not procedurally barred, including the 2 supplements to his June 2017 motion allowed by this court, which conclusively defeat the state's claim that successive and not supplemental motions were filed. Additionally, Mr. Avery presents Brady and Youngblood claims discovered after his June 2017 motion and new evidence which are not procedurally barred. At trial, the state's primary witness, Bobby Dassey, boo hiss, committed perjury when he testified that Ms. Halbach never left the Avery property and that he was asleep when he was doing internet searches. He has a direct connection to the murder by his subsequent admissions, violent pornography, and word searches that reflect knowledge of the crime and the victim, motive and opportunity to commit the crime, and plant evidence against Mr. Avery, including bones from his burn barrel and blood from Mr. Avery's sink. Trial defense counsel failed to hire the necessary experts and failed to investigate and establish third-party suspects pursuant to State versus Denny. Most importantly, the state's primary witness, Bobby, prior post-conviction counsel, was ineffective in all the same ways. Current post-conviction counsel has uncovered numerous Brady and Youngblood violations, the cumulative effect of which undermines confidence in the verdict. The state's brief fundamentally misunderstands the basic facts of the case, the law of the case effect of the supplements that this court allowed, the effect of the circuit court's legal errors, and the estoppel effect of the 2017 argument between Mr. Avery and the state. All right, and so next is when we get into a whole bunch of legal stuff that we're going to skip, where it's talking about other cases and so on. That just gets confusing here. Let me keep scrolling. Entertain yourselves while I'm scrolling. Okay, so this one says the circuit court believed that the new evidence could not have existed before 2017. That is not the standard. And then what it says here is Mr. Avery presented the following new evidence. Dr. Christopher Palahniuk, using a 2016 state-of-the-art microscope, examined item FL and the hood latch swab, and his findings have produced new evidence that is totally inconsistent with the state's theory that Ms. Halbach was shot in the head while lying on Mr. Avery's garage floor, and that the hood latch swab was actually used to swab a hood latch. Dr. John DeHaan, a forensic fire expert, determined that no body was ever burned in Mr. Avery's burn pit based upon data he collected from his experiments burning human cadavers since 2012. Dr. Carl Reich was able, through the use of new source testing developed after the trial, to eliminate blood, semen, and saliva as the sources of DNA from the hood latch swab, and offered the opinion that the DNA was consistent with what would be found on Mr. Avery's groin swab from his skin cells. The state mischaracterizes Mr. Avery's argument that trial defense counsel was ineffective, stating, in a nutshell, Avery argued in his June 2017 motion that Strang and Buting were ineffective because Avery believes he could have prevailed at trial if Strang and Buting had presented his planted evidence defense in the manner current post-conviction counsel formulated. Mr. Avery never argued that trial defense counsel were ineffective for failing to present his planted evidence defense. Instead, Mr. Avery argues that they were ineffective for failing to hire experts, failing to investigate and impeach Bobby Dassey, failing to establish third-party suspects, and failing in numerous other ways. That's talking about legal stuff. The state again misstates Mr. Avery's argument by claiming that Mr. Avery is contending that trial defense counsel should have hired his specific current experts, when Mr. Avery actually argues that trial defense counsel was ineffective for failing to hire experts in these specific areas of expertise: blood splatter, DNA, trace, ballistics, police procedure, forensic fire, and anthropology with kerf mark speculation. Mr. Avery never argued that trial defense counsel should have hired his specific experts. Instead, Mr. Avery argues that trial defense counsel was ineffective for failing to hire experts. Besides this, the state grossly mischaracterizes Mr. Avery's ineffective assistance of counsel argument as being that the quantity testing results were both newly discovered evidence and that Strang and Buting were ineffective for failing to present them. The newly discovered evidence supports Mr. Avery's argument that trial defense counsel failed to present an expert to establish that law enforcement planted Mr. Avery's DNA on the sub key. The reason trial defense counsel did not discover this evidence was their failure to hire experts, which trial defense counsel admits. And this is talking about Brady. We're skipping Brady and Youngblood. The state misconstrues the apparent or potential exculpatory nature of the Manitowoc County gravel pit bone fragments. Mr. Avery presented the affidavit of Dr. DeHaan that Ms. Halbach did not burn in Mr. Avery's burn pit, and her bones were planted there. Dr. DeHaan opined that Ms. Halbach was burned in a burn barrel. And it is undisputed that larger human bones were found in the Dassey burn barrel. Human scapula, portions of a spinal column, metacarpals, and long bone fragments. The Dassey burn barrel bones had cut marks. The gravel pit bones had cut marks. By destroying the gravel pit bones, the state prevented Dr. Symes, Mr. Avery's expert, from matching the cut marks between the burn barrel and the gravel pit, thereby establishing that the Dassey burn barrel was the primary burn site. This evidence would establish a direct connection between the Dassey burn barrel, the mutilation of Ms. Halbach, and the subsequent planting of bones in Mr. Avery's burn pit. Clearly, the killer performed all of these tasks. Dr. DeHaan ruled out tires as the accelerant. Dr. Eisenberg claimed that she detected the odor of a flammable liquid and not burned rubber from the bones in the Dassey burn barrel, which the state claimed was the accelerant used by Mr. Avery. Mr. Avery was deprived of the opportunity to link the gravel pit bones accelerant to the Dassey burn barrel bones. The evidence against Bobby of motive and opportunity is apparent. Additionally, if the gravel pit and Dassey burn barrel bones had been linked, the state's star witness would be converted into the primary suspect. Dr. DeHaan opines that the bones in Mr. Avery's burn pit were planted after being burned in a burn barrel. Dr. DeHaan stated, quote, "The discovery of larger fragments outside the margins of Avery's burn pit and the finding of human bone fragments with similar degrees of fire damage in numerous other areas, is also consistent with the dumping of burn remains into the alleged burn pit with some rolling or landing outside the pit," unquote. If Mr. Avery establishes in an evidentiary hearing, because that's one of the things they're trying for, a new trial or evidentiary hearing, or just release Stephen, that the primary burn site was the Dassey burn barrel, and the bones from that barrel were planted in Mr. Avery's burn pit, that evidence would be potentially exculpatory and would undermine confidence in this verdict. Mr. Avery has established that the state acted in bad faith. And now here's the legal thing of what is acted in bad faith is and other cases of acting in bad faith. Because Mr. Avery's factual allegations must be assumed as true, he is entitled to an evidentiary hearing. Mr. Avery's motion for relief was filed pursuant to Wisconsin statute, blah, blah, which requires a hearing unless the motion and the files and records of the action conclusively show that the person is entitled to no relief. And then here's the legal stuff on all of that. All right. The following chart illustrates the facts that must be assumed as true for Mr. Avery and the factual disputes raised by the state, which necessitate an evidentiary hearing. All right, so the first subject is Brady violations. The Romlo affidavit that the RAV4 was planted. Facts assumed to be true. The Romlo affidavit is true, and Mr. Romlo saw the RAV4 on November 4, 2005. November 4. Now, remember, Teresa Halbach went missing and was at the Avery Salvage Yard on Halloween. So this is 4 days after that. Okay, so on November 4, 2005, illustrating that it was planted and the state's theory that the RAV4 never left the Avery property is demonstrably false. Romlo's affidavit impeaches Sergeant Colburn's testimony that he was not looking at the RAV4 when he made the dispatch call regarding the vehicle's license plate. Because trial defense counsel did not have a police report documenting Sergeant Colburn's conversation with Mr. Romlo, they could not impeach Sergeant Colburn. The chronology of the 30 tracks of the MCSD calls to dispatch shows that the Sergeant Colburn's call was made on November 4, 2005. And the state's dispute is Romlo's seeing a similar car somewhere fails to establish any fact about the RAV4 being planted. Well, Mr. Romlo told Andy Colburn about it. All right, so the photograph of the poster seen by Romlo, see, I was about to go into that, but it continues on this next page, at the gas station included a photograph of Halbach's car. And then the state says, assuming Romlo's contentions are true, Romlo never even knew what Ms. Halbach's car actually looked like because he never saw a picture. So this is, if you've gone into our subgroup MAM Gossip, where I have taken the group on field trips to Manitowoc. So you can find them in MAM Gossip. So we once again go to this turnaround where Romlo says he saw the car parked. This is next to a river, and it's not far from everything in this case is very close together. So it is by Avery Salvage Yard. It is by where Barb Yonda at that time and Scott Toddock live now. And it is very close to the Senex station where this guy, Romlo, had walked into the Senex station where there was the missing or poster or paper taped on the window that also said the car. I don't know if it had did it have the picture of the car or not? That's what they're claiming here, that he didn't know, that he didn't see a picture. But so he told Colburn, who was there, that he saw this car, which is just a couple blocks away. It's literally 5 minutes away, if even that. So they can say whatever they want here of he didn't know for that it was that car. He reported it to Colburn that he saw the car that's 5 minutes away. Shouldn't Colborn have done his due diligence and gone and looked there? Oh, but wait, that same day he's making a call and reading off the license plate, but saying he just knew, he remembered that plate number from earlier when, it was just ingrained in his memory that he wasn't looking at the license plate. What makes more sense? Since you've got this Romlo who has nothing to gain in any of this, who not only did he tell Colborn he saw the car, he also texted Scott Toddick and told him he saw that car that people were looking for. And Scott Toddick also did nothing. So, what makes more sense when you hear Colborn saying that license plate? That he's just calling in on his personal phone, not the police radio. That he's calling on his personal phone to say, oh, is this the plate that we were looking for? Just because at random he wants to double check that plate. Or that he's looking at the car because Romlo had just told him he saw it there. Okay. Next is Radant affidavit, RAV4 planted. What Kathleen Scott stated as fact is the Radant affidavit is true. The Department of Justice agents knew that the RAV4 was planted on the Avery property. Quote, Mr. Radant affidavit contradicts the state's representation to the jury that the Avery property was inaccessible from the Radant pit. Which, if you've been there or seen pictures from that time, you know that it was so easy to drive from the Radant quarry into Avery salvage yard. What the state is disputing is, quote, Avery does not say who Radant had this conversation with, when it occurred, what the context was, what this person's belief was based on, or why Radant did not tell trial counsel or anyone else about it in the 12 years between the trial and his affidavit, unquote. There was a 20-foot berm separating Avery's trailer from access to the rest of the salvage yard and Radant pit. Because, all right, so what they're referring to in there is Radant said law enforcement had come to him wanting to go through his property and everything because they knew they were claiming the car was driven through there to be planted on Avery salvage. They told it to him, and he's just reporting what was said to him. Next, flyover video. RAV4 planted after November 4, 2005. Fact, the flyover video was deliberately edited to conceal that the RAV4 was not present on the Avery property on November 4, 2005. Quote, on November 4, 2005, Wendy Baldwin and CCSD Sheriff Jerry Pago conducted a flyover searching for the RAV4. They were in the air for about 4 hours, yet produced only 3 minutes of flyover footage. Prosecutor Kratz made a material admission when he told the jury that the RAV4 was not visible in the flyover video, unquote. A credibility determination must be made of the Kratz statement that the vehicle was not present. The state's contention, quote, Avery's claim that the flyover video was edited was utterly devoid of facts and relied wholly on Avery's speculation that more footage must have existed because the prosecutor said the RAV4 was not visible on the video and the flyover video only produced 3 minutes of footage. They were flying more than 3 minutes. Period. End of story. So, 3 minutes, 4 hours, doesn't matter. You know they were flying more than 3 minutes. Why is there only 3 minutes of video? Next section. Zipper answering machine. Ms. Halbach killed after she left the Avery salvage yard. Fact. The Zipper voicemail was concealed because it demonstrated that Ms. Halbach's final stop was the Zippers and not the Averys. Quote, the contents of the Zipper voicemail may have contradicted the timeline established by the state that Ms. Halbach's last stop was the Avery salvage yard. Ms. Zipper testified at trial that Ms. Halbach arrived at their property at 3 p.m. The state placed Ms. Halbach at the Avery property at approximately 2:30 p.m. State's contention: nothing about Halbach leaving a voicemail at 2:12 p.m. stating that she can't find the Zipper's house, but then arriving at 3 p.m. does anything to, quote, contradict the timeline established by the state. Well, that voicemail is suspect because they just commingled everything. So was that the voicemail left at the Zippers? Was that voicemail left on Barb's, Yonda's phone? What really was it? We don't know. If you listen to police recordings from early on in the investigation, you will hear them state as fact, law enforcement stating as fact, that the order of her appointments for the day was Schmitz, Avery, Zipper. And that they were all afraid of George Zipper, the cops were, and didn't want to go question him because he was drunk and disorderly and making threats and all this. Nobody wanted to talk to Zipper. And the timeline itself is always so screwy, but we'll get into that in a little bit. All right. Next category. Heidel's affidavit. Ms. Halbach's day planner was in the RAV4 on 10/31/2005 and then in the possession of Ryan Hilgas. Fact. Ryan Hilgas is established as a third-party Denny suspect because he was in possession of Ms. Halbach's day planner. The state says there is no proof that this was Ms. Halbach's day planner. Well, she's got stuff handwritten on that day planner from a phone call that was made when she was going to these 3 appointments that day. So how does Ryan Hilgas have something Teresa Halbach wrote on October 31st, 2005? How does he have that? She wrote it in the car while she was driving. How does Ryan Hilgas have that? Next section. Detective Veli, however you say it, CD. Detective Veli's CD contained new material evidence that had been previously concealed from prior counsel. Quote, the forensic findings and opinions of Detective Veli were entirely contained on the CD in his final report and not on the 7 DVDs, unquote. The CD contained recovered pornography. Quote, the 7 DVDs did not contain the results of Dr. Veli's unique search terms found exclusively on the CD. Those search results are as follows: 2,632 search results for the terms blood, 1, body, 2083, bondage, 3, bullet, 10, cement, 23, DNA, 3, fire, 51, gas, 50, gun, 75, handcuff, 2, journal, 106, MySpace, 61, news, 54, RAV, 74, stab, 32, throat, 2, and tires, 2. State says, Avery does not point to items of evidence he did not have that were on the Veli CD, but not on the hard drive. He just complains that he could not have guessed what search terms Veli used during his examination. Now, this is again, okay, they turned over to Stephen's defense these 7 DVDs, but he didn't get this CD that had all this stuff on it. So, what's up with that? Why did you not give him all the evidence? And now I've got on my screen saying we're having trouble playing this video. So I don't know if you're even hearing me at this point. I'll continue, but let me know if I'm gone. All right. Next section is impeachment of Bobby Dassey's trial testimony. Facts. Bobby committed perjury at Mr. Avery's trial when he testified that he never saw Ms. Halbach leave the Avery property. This CD contained exculpatory material evidence that was directly relevant to the credibility of Bobby and would have allowed trial defense counsel to allege Bobby committed the crime. And the state's failure to disclose it violated Mr. Avery's due process right to a fair trial. Only Bobby had access to the computer during the day on weekdays when the violent pornography searches were conducted. Bobby's trial testimony that he's asleep from 6:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. was contradicted by current post-conviction counsel experts, Mr. Hunt, who found that Bobby accessed the computer 6 times during the time frame. And I have everybody saying that this live is paused. Let me see here. All right. Christopher is saying everything's running smoothly there, so I will continue. Christopher, can you please let me know if I do completely cut off and if I need to start another one? Thank you very much, because my screen is black, so I don't see anything. All right. And now the state's contention on Bobby's trial testimony is Avery fails to explain why a single statement from Brian to the police that Bobby saw Halbach leave the property would have tipped multiple other accounts that conflicted with Bobby Dassey's testimony. The fact that someone views violent pornography does not diminish their credibility as a witness, as Avery claims. Though distasteful, it has nothing to do with their truthfulness, nor would viewing violent pornography refute anything about Bobby's claim that he never saw Ms. Halbach leave the Avery property. So, Bobby Dassey's brother, Brian, has said that Bobby told him that he saw Teresa Halbach leave. We also know that the mother, Barb, now Tadek, has also said, she has posted on Facebook that Bobby told her that he saw Teresa Halbach leave. So that absolutely does refute everything Bobby said at trial, that he saw her walking towards Steven's trailer. He hops in to take a shower, and when he comes back, she's gone. And then you've got the whole pornography thing. So they're trying to say all this awful stuff that was on Bobby Dassey's computer. I don't care what the family tries to say about this computer. This computer was in Bobby's bedroom. Yes, it was accessible for anybody in that trailer to use. But it was in Bobby's room, and these things that they're citing were all done during the day. Bobby works at night. He's the only one home during the day. Everybody else is at work or school. I know some of the Avery family members want to claim that it's Steven who did those searches, but that makes no sense when Steven has his own internet. If he's going to look up pornography or any of this stuff, why he wouldn't just do it in his own home? It's not like his girlfriend was there. She was in jail for whatever DUI that was. She's had so many, so it's hard to keep track. So these are things that Bobby Dassey absolutely looked up. They're desperate to say that Bobby didn't look those things up. So if you really want to say it's not Bobby, why does it bother you so much? And then you want to claim that looking up these things doesn't mean that you would have done something to Teresa Halbach, but they were looking for porn at Steven's trailer because they wanted to be able to use porn against Steven. Yet they didn't find anything. And if they had found all of this on Steven's computer, they absolutely would have used it against him. Absolutely. So, yes, looking at porn and looking up these things does not make you a murderer. But when you're going to look at somebody at Avery Salvage as being a possible suspect, who's more likely? Person who looks up all these things or the person who doesn't? And then why was the state so desperate to cover it up that you did not give the CD to the defense that showed all these things were looked up on Bobby Dassey's computer? Why did the state tell Steven's defense that it was Brendan's computer and there was nothing on there of note? Kratz purposely said it was Brendan's computer to Strang and Buting. Now, to me, that points again to ineffective assistance of counsel from Strang and Buting. Why are you going to listen to Kratz when Kratz says, oh, it's Brendan's computer and there's nothing on there? You know, because they know Brendan is this 16-year-old kid with a low IQ who only cares about wrestling and video games. You know, what really, yeah, who cares? What's, you know, the defense obviously knows that Brendan is not this killer, right? So, okay, but why would you take Kratz's word for that? And this is after he had done that press conference, making up all those lies, claiming that Brendan had said. So, absolutely ineffective assistance of counsel that you just said, oh, okay, it's Brendan's computer. There's nothing on it. We're not going to ask to look at it ourselves. All right, so the next category is titled Factual Disputes Regarding Ineffective Assistance of Counsel Claims. Blood spatter expert Stuart James. Fact: the blood spatter in the RAV4 was selectively planted and did not come from an actively bleeding finger. And then the state claims, but James's experiments simply assume a number of variables James cannot account for, such as how deep Avery's reopened cut was, how much a partially healed cut would have bled, how he moved about the RAV4, and the many other ways blood flakes would end up somewhere. I still want somebody to show me, if your finger is bleeding here and you're turning a key in the ignition, how your finger would smear blood on the dash. Does anybody's finger touches the dash when they turn the key, that it would make those little Q-tip squiggly lines on the dash? How is there blood but no fingerprints? Oh, he's wearing gloves. Then how is there blood if he's wearing gloves? The blood is suspect. Is planted. Bullet fragment number FL. Bullet fragment FL never passed through Ms. Halbach's skull, as the state's expert opined. The state's forensic pathologist, Dr. Jensen, testified that Ms. Halbach's cause of death was the result of 1 or 2 gunshot wounds to her head. Jensen testified that Ms. Halbach's DNA got on at number FL when it traveled through her brain, causing her death. Dr. Eisenberg testified that there was no evidence of other gunshot wounds to the bones from other parts of Ms. Halbach's body. And now the state says, but contrary to what Avery claims, no one ever said that FK and FL were the 2 bullets fired into Ms. Halbach's skull. Avery made that inferential leap on his own. The only place they're claiming she was shot is her head, because that's the only phony bone fragment they have that had that little curved piece in it, in that skull bone, that they said there was something consistent with lead on it. So they don't even know for fact that that bone was shot. They're inferring that, the state. No other bones are showing a alleged bullet hole. And then when you have these bullet fragments that have Teresa's DNA on them, allegedly, that we know came from the chapstick, because there was also a waxy substance on it, and that still makes no sense to me on why you're going to take evidence from Teresa Halbach's home and bring it to Stevens. Why are you bringing evidence from the victim's home to the alleged suspect? Why is it there? Why did you bring chapstick to Stephen Avery's trailer? Why did you bring dirty underwear to Stephen Avery's trailer? Why did you bring dildos to Stephen Avery's trailer? All things that have DNA on them. Next section. Groin swab planted. Facts. The groin swab was substituted for the hood latch swab by Investigator Wiegert. Investigator Wiegert hand-printed Deputy Hawkins' name on the form, again deliberately misidentifying Deputy Hawkins as the submitting officer. Poor Hawkins. Which was a complete misrepresentation. The state fails to acknowledge the significance of Investigator Wiegert signing Deputy Hawkins' name on the WSCL form when he delivered the alleged hood latch swab. Now the states. Avery based this scenario entirely on the failure of the nurse to note on her report that a groin swab had been taken but discarded, which according to him, quote, a well-qualified nurse, unquote, would have done, and the fact that Wiegert and Fassbender instructed Deputy Hawkins and Sergeant Tyson to swab the hood latch, battery cables, and interior and exterior door handles, but did not include the interior hood release lever and hood prop. So they took a groin swab from Stephen even though it wasn't ordered. And then when somebody caught them, they mimed throwing it away, but still had it. You don't know anything that happened to Teresa Halbach. This is days after she's allegedly missing. What would his groin have to do with a missing girl? And if it had happened on the day she was there, you think you're still going to find something on his groin? And then you have Wiegert. Now remember, Wiegert and Fassbender are the ones that manipulated Brendan. So they already show they have no credibility and the lengths they will go to make the case that they want. Lies about who was there. And put this Deputy Hawkins name on it. Deputy Hawkins is the same one that the gravel pit bones were given to. Next section. Hilgas evidence. Trial defense counsel was ineffective in failing to investigate Hilgas as a third-party Denny suspect. State says Avery provided nothing establishing, one, that the abusive relationship, well, they have that in quotes, abusive relationship Halbach supposedly was in with Hilgas, that Hilgas knew about Halbach's sexual history with Blodorn. Now, and that's something that they don't ever really tell you is Teresa Halbach was having sex with Scott Blodorn, who was her roommate, that is also friends with Ryan Hilgas and her brother, Michael Halbach. So they're saying, that Ryan Hilgas wouldn't be jealous of them having sex because how do you know he even knew about it? And even if Hilgas did know about it, that he cared. Avery just proclaimed with no evidence whatsoever that Hilgas committed perjury about it. And then Kathleen says it must be assumed that Hilgas was in possession of Ms. Halbach's day planner. And the state says there is no proof that this was Ms. Halbach's day planner. Then what is it? People testified that Teresa would handwrite her schedule. This was written in her handwriting. Somebody testified that they made that call to her that day for that appointment. That is written on the piece of paper that Ryan Hilgas had in his possession. All right. Subkey planted location. Kathleen. Bookcase experiment demonstrates that state's trial theory about the discovery of Ms. Halbach's key in Mr. Avery's bedroom was false. State says, importantly, the experiment key and lanyard were able to be pushed through the back of his experimental bookcase by striking it with a photo album. They're seriously grasping with this key, this magic key that isn't there over so many searches. And when you see what they've done to that trailer, the way they trashed it in the searches, just ripping it apart, destroying it. And, they can't take pictures of bones, but they take pictures of Stephen's bookcase, and everything is back on the bookcase all nice, that Colborne says he was violently shaking it. And so for that, they'll put stuff back in the bookcase, even change that you can see in a before picture that's on top of the table. The change is all there. Everything's all nice and neat back on the bookcase. The rest of the place is trashed. And oh, look, there's the key. Doesn't have Teresa's DNA on it, but it has Stephen's. Does it have fingerprint? No, again, no fingerprint. It's landing by his slippers. Think slippers could be all sweaty and have your sweat DNA on it to get on that key? Could you have used his toothbrush that Stephen said was missing? And then you've got Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, Lincoln Colborne, who you're not supposed to be doing anything on this case. You're supposed to be just helping as needed, because you wrongly convicted him and had him serve 18 years for a crime he didn't do. Oh, but you're the ones that find this key. It's a miracle. So now Teresa, who drives for a living, going around taking all these photographs, her key going in and out of her car, doesn't have any of her DNA on it. Nothing at all. Only Stephen's. It's not suspicious, even a little bit, is it? Next section is subkey planted DNA quantity. The subkey was planted in Mr. Avery's bedroom as evidenced by the bookcase experiment and DNA quantities. Quote, Dr. Reich opines that the DNA found on the Toyota subkey found in Mr. Avery's bedroom was planted. Dr. Reich conducted experiments which demonstrated that Mr. Avery deposited 10 times less DNA on the exemplar key, subkey, than what was discovered by the WSCL and used to convict Mr. Avery. State says, what Avery glossed over was that he undeniably left his DNA on the exemplar key during this experiment. Which again was obviously conducted in a controlled environment and cannot account for the many other variables that could lead to Avery depositing more skin cells on the key, and with Avery in a different physical condition than one would be when trying to hide evidence of a murder. He has no need to hide the key in his home, that he's the only one in there. So if he's saving this key or whatever, he could have just left it on his kitchen counter. He doesn't have to hide it in his bedroom and making it out like, this is such a clandestine thing of him trying to hide it behind things in his bookcase. There's no need for that. There's no need for him to have the key. Plus, okay, she's going to go into it because I was going to talk about the key. Let me just read this next section. Significance of subkey. Dr. Reich opines that the DNA found on the Toyota subkey found in Mr. Avery's bedroom was planted. Dr. Reich conducted experiments which demonstrated that Mr. Avery deposited 10 times less DNA on the exemplar subkey than what was discovered by the WSCL and used to convict Mr. Avery. The state says, second, like his hood latch experiment, Avery's experiment holding an exemplar key bolsters rather than weakens the state's case. Significance of subkey. The the magic key found in Stephen's bedroom, allegedly found in Stephen's bedroom, is her valet key. It is not the key she used on a daily basis. It's on that blue cord, whatever the heck it's called that I can't think of right now, which her younger sisters testified to that they had given her, that there's another end to it. So she had on that, this, and this is just me saying this, not them, on, because I know in my experience that's what I've had on mine, is you had your ignition key was on one end of it and the extra key was on the other end of it. You have both Thomas Pierce from the photography studio and her friend who she had gone on vacation with in August testified that Teresa was extremely paranoid of losing her keys. So, why would she have only one key? If you are afraid of losing your keys, you do not have multiple key rings to keep track of. So where is her house key? She had a key to the photography studio. Where is that? No. This is her spare key. Then you can look at that key. You can look at keys for a RAV4 and the way it is shaped. That key is a spare key, known as the valet key, that would work the ignition, but isn't going to work like a glove box and such. So they didn't have access to the real key that she used. Where did they get her valet key? Because do you think that she kept all the keys, the spare key with her on the same thing? Because if you're worried about losing your keys, why would you keep your spare with the original? You need it as backup. So, was that key at her home? Next section. Electronic devices planted. Current post-conviction counsel's investigator conducted a series of experiments refuting Mr. Fabian's trial testimony that on October 31, 2005, he was in the vicinity of Mr. Avery's burn barrel and smelled the distinct odor of burning plastic coming from Mr. Avery's burn barrel. State says Avery's experiment could not account for environmental conditions on October 31, 2005, any sensitivity of Mr. Fabian's, or the fact that Avery clearly put other items in the barrel as well. Who is Mr. Fabian? Robert Fabian was Earl Avery, Stephen's brother's friend, who was riding around in a golf cart with Earl that day. And Earl and Robert are brothers-in-law. Their wives at that time were sisters, Candy and Cindy LaFlash. So he says that he smelled plastic from burn barrel. State or defense, who cares? The whole burn barrel thing, where they live, they do not have garbage service. There is not a garbage truck that comes one day a week that you put your cans out at the curb and they pick up your garbage and take it away for you. They have to drive their stuff to a dump. So they burn lots of stuff on a regular basis because who wants to take stuff to the dump all the time? So they're burning food items, they're burning clothes that they're going to get, just throw out. Um so they burn stuff all the time, and a variety of things, plastic, clothes, whatever. All right, next are the young blood violations. Destruction of bones. Kathleen says the circuit court erred in concluding that the Manitowoc County gravel pit bones were non human, when in fact the Manitowoc quarry bones were labeled as human by Dr. Eisenberg in her reports describing property tag numbers number 7411 as calcine human bone frags. 5 of 13 burned calcined with cut edges. Most bone fragments were all cut bone fragments are human. Number 7413, one burned human frag. Number 7414, burned calcined human bone fragments. Number 7416, human bone fragments. Human is calcined with one cut edge. And number 7419, cut burned human bone. State says none of the bone fragments recovered from locations in the quarry were positively identified as human, let alone the remains of Teresa Halbach. They are so desperate to make their case work by, shoving that square peg through the round hole, to say that Stephen Avery never left Avery Salvage, and everything that was done to Teresa Halbach had to occur at the salvage yard. So for bones to be found in the quarry that is right behind Avery Salvage Yard, and then the Manitowoc gravel pit that's farther away, they have to try and say, these aren't the bones you're looking for. These aren't Teresa Halbach's bones. We don't know what those bones are, so we're not even going to talk about these bones. Yet they then later, years later, give those bones to the Halbach family, destroying evidence. Brady violation leading to Youngblood violation. Kathleen says it must be assumed that there was a Brady violation when the state failed to disclose the police report. The failure to disclose the police report led to the destruction of the gravel pit bones, of which prior post-conviction counsel was unaware. There must be an evidentiary hearing to determine whether prior post-conviction counsel knew of the specific bone fragments that were given to the Halbach family. State says the state has conceded that there would have been a Brady violation if prior post-conviction counsel did not know about the evidence that was destroyed. And that's all they say on that. You destroyed them. They were given to the Halbach family using that Deputy Hawkins again to sign it out. They were delivered to the funeral home that Teresa Halbach's service had been in, and that the Halbachs use. It's a small little town, so it went back to that same funeral home. What was done with those bones? Did we ever find out for sure what was done with them, if they were cremated, or what did the funeral home do with those bones? But it's not so easy to then, if you were to dig up Teresa's grave, how, are all the bones cremated? Are they bones that are buried that are now all mixed together? You destroyed that evidence. You hid that evidence, and you knew what you were doing. Kathleen's conclusion. Now, again, remember this was filed June 26, 2020. For the reasons stated herein, Stephen Avery respectfully requests that this court grant him one of the following alternative remedies. 1. Reverse the orders denying post-conviction relief and remand for the state to file a response to the motion of post-conviction relief and order additional scientific testing per the September 18, 2017 agreement and or grant an evidentiary hearing. 2. Reverse the judgments of conviction and the orders denying post-conviction relief and remand for a new trial. And that's it from her filing. So that's where Stephen's case is currently. We're waiting to hear if we can get an evidentiary trial on this new evidence for them giving the bones to the Halbach family, for them covering up what was on Bobby Dassey's computer, for Bobby Dassey telling people that he saw Teresa Halbach leave that day. So she's asking for either an evidentiary hearing or a whole new trial. But the court does not have a deadline of when they have to give their answer. And we're also in a global pandemic that cases get pushed back. And so it's just wait. And now we just in the States had an election recently. And so those are changing. So that's what we're waiting for on Stephen. We have people all the time that, message us asking what's going on with the case. Nothing. There's nothing happening with the case. We go months and months without there being anything to report on Stephen's case. We're waiting for the judge's response to this. Waiting. And this weekend is the 5-year anniversary of Making a Murderer being released. So Kathleen Zellner has only had this case 5 years. And she says it typically takes her 16 to overturn a wrongful conviction. That's how horrible this system is, and that they're able to put this stuff off. Right, Kelly's saying, isn't there a law that to a speedy trial? Yeah. I guess they'll say he got a speedy trial. He was convicted. So Brendan's case is different. Stephen has always maintained his innocence. Brendan confessed. Now we know Brendan's confession was coerced and he was just making it up. They kept trying to get him to say something. He didn't understand what they were fishing for. He has a low IQ. He doesn't have good social skills. He's scared of law enforcement. So Brendan confessed. And that's actually all they have on Brendan. There is no evidence on Brendan. There's nothing to show that Brendan's even ever been in Stephen's trailer. Nothing. So Brendan, and the way our system works, and this is just my layperson's description of it, because I'm not a wannabe lawyer, no, and don't know anything about it. But you always have to go from one court, and when you lose there, then you can put in to try to get to this court, And if you lose there, you can be bumped back down and have to start over here. And then you have to have new evidence to get that to be considered. And then if that's denied, you get bumped here. And then you're trying to go to the Supreme Court, blah, blah. Well, Brendan's like been to all the levels. There's nothing new that comes out for Brendan's case. You know, they've already said that his confession was coerced. You can't try, you know, that's not new evidence to try and bring up. So Brendan is really trying to rely on the governor of Wisconsin granting him clemency, which is something you don't typically want, because if a governor is commuting, you know, pardoning you, however you want to word it, that's you saying you're guilty. So you're not going to get any post-conviction relief. You know, he can't then go after Fassbender and Wiegert for what they did to him. But which do you prefer? Do you just want to be free? You know, and when you're looking at so much time in prison and it doesn't look good in any other way to get you out, that's your last resort, is to get the governor to pardon you or whatever. We get people who ask every day, why can't the president do that? Well, the way it works is you can, a president can only pardon federal cases. Brendan and Stephen's cases are state cases, not federal. So only a governor can release them. And the Wisconsin governor has already said he is not going to release Brendan, that he only commutes their sentence or clemency or all that. They had to have served X amount of their time first. Or a lot of times people do not get their clemency until they've served all their time and they're out. And they just want that clemency so they can now get a job or whatever, you know, that it helps them for that. So this governor has already said that according to the way he does that, Brendan doesn't apply. And I know there are people that are harassing that governor daily, but he's already made it known he's not going to do it. So no amount of harassing him is going to make him flip that. And all you're doing is pissing him off and will make him double down on it. I know people want to help and do something, but you're hurting, not helping, by harassing the governor. This was not the governor at the time of the case. You know, so I don't know. But yeah, I know I know people are desperate to help Brendan, and I get it. You know, you want the kid freed. But I had always been advised by Brendan's attorneys to leave them alone. Leave the judge alone, leave the governor alone. Don't do anything. So, I believe they've changed their minds on that. But that doesn't make me feel any better. It makes me look like it looks like to me that the case is desperate. I mean, and it is. It's, you know, you want Brendan to go free. And even if Kathleen Zellner is able to free Stephen, it doesn't mean Brendan gets to go home too. because they're two different people that were tried separately with different scenarios, which I don't understand. So now in Stephen's case, there was no Brendan. That him and Brendan weren't doing this together. None of that. But in Brendan's case, it's all, them two together. And what'd you do to her head, Brendan? Punched her. What else? Cut her hair. What else? Cut her throat. That Brendan and Stephen both raped her. Yet there's not a drop of evidence, physical evidence, that they did it. So Brendan was prosecuted on just his confession. And even if Stephen is to go free, it doesn't mean his alleged confession wouldn't still be true and that he just said Stephen instead of who it really was. That's what some people say. I believe both of them are 100% innocent. So I don't go with that at all. But you've got Kathleen Zellner's other case, that the Ryan Ferguson case. That, so Ryan Ferguson is like the Stephen Avery in that case, that somebody else said he was part of it. And she freed Ryan Ferguson, and Charles is still in prison. I see Pete saying cat burner. Who are you saying is a cat burner? Because Stephen didn't do that, right? Stephen just took the blame for it. Now, Stephen was there when it happened. And I don't condone it for a second that happened. That doesn't mean you murder a person. So you can dislike Stephen for that whole cat burning incident. I don't like it at all. But again, Stephen didn't throw the cat in the fire. Somebody else who was there that night did. If you follow all the evidence, read all the evidence, and not just go by making a murderer, you will find that Stephen Avery didn't burn the cat. He's one of several men that were there that night. But just because you don't like Stephen doesn't mean he did anything to Teresa Halbach. There is zero proof that Stephen did anything. What's his motive? Gonna say he's all angry for 18 years that he served for a crime he didn't do? He was about to get lots of money. This is October 31. He was going to be getting $400 and something thousand from the state by Christmas. And his $36 million suit just started. Because that 200 and something thousand is different than the 36 million. So why is he going to kill some random girl? He had a girlfriend. Yes, Jody was in jail at the time. But she was able to leave jail to go to alcohol classes. And Stephen would pick her up and drive her to her alcohol classes. He thought that's what he was going to be doing that day. And you can see when you look at his phone records, he was on the phone with Jody's lawyer. Alexandra says, would you be able to clarify if Stephen's case gets thrown out, why wouldn't Brendan be also released? Didn't they use Stephen's conviction and facts of his case to support their case against Brendan? They did they tried them for completely different scenarios. And so I don't know if you heard what I had said before is there are people that suspect the things that Brendan said are true. It was just somebody else who was doing them with Brendan. Bobby, his brother, that he's protecting. I don't for a second believe that, but that's what would be used against Brendan. Right. Jen says, why would he pick that time to kill someone? So he'd been out of jail for 2 years. This is a public business who is open. That's open. It was a Monday. It's during the day. He had her personal cell phone number, yet he made the appointment by calling Auto Trader, leaving a trail that she was going to be at his house. Why wouldn't he just call her cell phone? But it's because this car was his sister's, that since, the sister's at work and Stephen is there during the day, and Stephen runs everything, even now while in prison. A lot of the things that get done at that salvage yard are because of Stephen. Still, Stephen likes the salvage yard. He likes the business. His two brothers could care less about it. Stephen's the one that'll say, we need this equipment and we need, so Stephen's still trying to run the business. So Stephen's the one that would sell cars. So it makes perfect sense that when his sister Barb wants to sell a vehicle, that Stephen would be the one to do it. So Stephen called Auto Trader and used the name B, period, Yonda, which is Barb's name because it's Barb's car. And it's what I would have done as well. I'm selling her car. So we're putting this under B, Yonda. State tries to make it out as Stephen hiding. No, because if that's the case, why wouldn't Stephen have her go completely someplace else entirely and not come to the salvage yard? So he has her cell phone number because Teresa was paid $10 per car if it was organized through Auto Trader. If it's one that she procured by what they called a hustle shot, she got 20. So this was somebody who wasn't planning on selling their car, or she just drove past somewhere where there was a car with a for sale sign on it, and that's the only way the person was trying to sell their car. And then she's like, hey, I'm going to take this picture of your car, and here's the information. Now the picture's already taken. You just reach out to Auto Trader, and they're going to list your car for sale. So she makes twice the money by doing a hustle shot. So when Stephen is somebody that she's gone there multiple times to take pictures of cars Stephen was selling, she gave him her cell phone number. Sorry, pause. Because she wants the extra $10. But Stephen, this not being a car he's selling as Stephen Avery, he's selling for B Yonda. He called Auto Trader and scheduled this. He could have done the cell phone, could have been all secret if he's planning to murder this random girl. So then they're saying he did this during the day in a working business. That Robert Fabian and Earl Avery are driving a golf cart around the property shooting at animals. Anybody hear her scream? Nothing. Nothing. The only person allegedly to see her there, other than Stephen, is Bobby Dassey. whose story and timeline just doesn't add up and changes. Stephen Avery has said that Bobby Dassey paid attention to whenever Teresa Halbach was coming to the salvage yard and would comment about her being at the salvage yard. Why did Bobby Dassey care that Teresa Halbach was at the salvage yard? Stephen's story has always been the same. Nothing has ever changed, other than when he is first questioned days later. Did you have a fire that night? He wasn't sure. Did he have a fire that night? Did he not have a fire that night? Because when you're burning stuff all the time, which night was that I had a fire? So that's not suspect at all that he wasn't sure at first if he had a fire on Halloween night or not. Because he had also wanted to do a fire around that time. And he wanted Brendan to come to the fire. But he had gotten into a fight, an argument with his sister, who then didn't allow Brendan to go to the fire. So then he and Barb made up. And then when Stephen had a fire, Brendan was there. So what night was that? What night was I gonna have the fire and Brendan couldn't be there? And then so that doesn't look guilty to me at all. That's not suspect at all. That you're not knowing 4 days later, 5 days later. Because her own family didn't even know she was missing. That she lives next door to. Her roommate that she has sex with didn't know she was missing for days. They found out because her boss at the photography studio called because he hadn't heard from her. That's how the Halbach family first figured out that Teresa was missing days later. So, but it's okay to dismiss that none of them had any idea how many days Teresa's missing. But you're going to fault that Stephen doesn't know right away days later if he had a fire that night. When fires are so common because you're burning your garbage. So, other than that, Stephen's story is always the same. It never changes. When you're telling the truth, it's easy to remember. Stephen remembers that day. Are you going to remember for sure exact times on things? No, you're not as clever as Bobby Dassey when he's driving that day and he passes his co-killer, Scott Taddock, and they're driving allegedly the opposite direction. So he looks at his clock, so he knows exactly the time that he and Scott Taddock saw each other. You know, I'm going to guess that Stephen Avery was never somebody who really paid attention to time. You're working on the salvage yard that you live on. I'm just not going to think he's paying attention exactly to what time everything is happening. So I think I have this in this notebook here. Now, because I had grabbed this notebook because I was going to make notes for things to discuss today. And the very first page on this has a thing that says state timeline. That I don't know how long ago I wrote this. So let's go through the state's timeline of that day from, I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how long ago I wrote this. I don't know where I got this information from. But these are times on that Halloween day. 8:12 a.m. Stephen calls Auto Trader. 9:46 a.m. Teresa calls Auto Trader. 11:43 a.m. Teresa leaves a voicemail on Barb Tadek's machine. 1:10 p.m. Teresa is at the Schmitz's, her first stop of the day. 2:12 p.m. Teresa leaves a voicemail on the Zippers machine that then gets lost. At 2:24 p.m., Stephen uses star 67 to call Teresa Halbach. At 2:27 p.m., Teresa talks to Auto Trader and tells him she's going to the Avery salvage yard. At 2:35 p.m., Stephen is also star 67 to Teresa again. From 2:32 to 2:45 is when Bobby Dassey claims he woke up, saw Teresa Halbach, he took a shower, and he left at 2:45, but he didn't see Teresa when he left at 2:45. From 2:41 to 2:43, Teresa's phone call, I don't know what FW is. FW tower. Okay, so Teresa's phone pinged off of a tower that is 7.8 miles away from Avery Salvage Yard. 3 p.m. is when Scott says he saw Bobby Dassey. All right, so Bobby is saying he left at 2:45, but 15 minutes later is when he is seeing Scott, which, if you've ever watched any of my field trips up there on where everything is, 15 minutes is a long time. There is no way it was 15 minutes. 3:46 p.m. Blaine says he saw Stephen at his burn barrel. At 4:35 p.m., there's an alibi call to Teresa Halbach from landline. Don't remember what that is, what that note's for. At 4:45 p.m., Robert Fabian said he saw the fire in the burn barrel. At 7:30, somewhere between 7:30 to 7:45 p.m. is when Scott Tadek claims he saw a fire behind Stephen's garage. 11 p.m. is when Blaine came home and he said he saw Stephen at the fire. So those are the times that I have on there. On the next page are just dates of November 5th is when the RAV4 was found. November 6th is, what does this say? Something in burn barrel. Electronics under, but there was plants not burned. So electronics were burned in a burn barrel, but yet there were plants in there and they weren't burned at all. On November 7th is when they found 5 blood drops in the RAV. On November 8th is when bones, tooth, and rivets in the burn pit. The key in the trailer and the license plate that was taken off the RAV4 and put in another car in the pit. On November 9th is when they arrested Stephen for being a felon having a gun. That's what they originally took Stephen in for, and that's a thing that a lot of people forget, is that no matter what happened with Teresa Halbach's case, Stephen was going to go to prison because of him being a felon and there being a gun in his home. So November 9th is when Stephen is arrested. 9 days. November 15th is when Stephen was charged with murder. Then on March 1st and 2nd of 2006 is when they found bullets in the garage. March 8th is when they added sexual assault, kidnapping, and false imprisonment to his charges. April 3rd is when they swabbed the hood latch. May 8th is when Sherry Culhane, the big-haired chick, says that Teresa Halbach's DNA was on the bullet and Stephen was on the hood latch. May 8th. This occurred allegedly October 31st. May 8th. June 15th is when the state tried to add 9 other counts to Stephen. But on September 22nd, the court ruled against all those extra charges. Then on February 2nd, 2007, the case, the Teresa Halbach went missing in 2005. This is February 2nd, 2007. The state dropped the sexual assault and kidnapping charge against Stephen. On September 18th, 2017, is when Kathleen Zellner meets the state about the RAV4 battery cables, the bar underneath the driver's seat, that you would have to do to move your seat forward or back, hood latch, interior hood release, license plates, lug wrench, pelvic bones, the number 8675 bone. That's all I had left on there. What is this list? I guess these are just other notes I had taken. So we'll just go through these other notes that I have here that I haven't read until reading right now, so I don't even know what they all say. Male DNA was found on the license plates, not Stephen's, nor was it tested. So they know it was male, but they're not testing anybody to see whose DNA it was. Kevin Romlo, who said he saw the RAV4 near the dam on November 3rd and 4th. He told Colborn about it on November 4th. He texted Scott Tadek on December 12th and December 19th after 2016, after watching Making a Murderer. Jason Redant said that Department of Justice agents said the RAV4 went through his property. Flyover video that there's 4 hours, but they only gave turnover 3 minutes of footage. That occurred on November 4th. Zipper voicemail. Remacher listed on November 3rd and made the CD, but it disappeared, and then that's when they claimed that Zippers was the last appointment. Heidel talked to Teresa Halbach around 11:35 a.m. while she was driving, and she wrote it in her day planner. Bobby Dassey. Search images and terms. Ineffective assistance of counsel, didn't have experts. Groin swabs, Wiegert didn't throw it away. That happened on November 9th. Audio expert. Have you ever heard that when Colborn is calling in the plates and people are sure that they hear somebody saying something in the background with him, possibly Pam Sturm? Audio expert is saying the person says it's hers. Then I have written book key. How key gets by slippers. Bobby Dassey changed his story on the stand and said he saw Teresa Halbach walk towards Stephen's trailer. But Brian Dassey said Bobby told him he saw Teresa leave. Ryan Hilgas, it was an abusive relationship. He was mad that she lied that she had been having sex with Blodorn. He lies about an insurance claim for her smashed taillight. There are gaps in her phone record that Ryan Hilgas had collected for law enforcement. There's 8 minutes and 55 seconds of Teresa's voicemails that were deleted. There were 22 unidentified calls. And look, there's more. Blood was selectively dripped, meaning it's planted. There was no blood stain underneath the blood flakes. If somebody is actively bleeding from their finger, that there's going to be blood drips, it's going to stain the carpeting. It's not going to just be these hard flakes that are resting on top of the carpet. The bullet has no bone particles on it. Stephen's DNA planted on the key. The body was not burned in Stephen's pit. Bobby Dassey lied about a back scratch. Claimed that is from a puppy on his back. But Teresa, Kathleen's experts were able to show no, those scratches on his back could not have been made by a puppy. They were human scratches on his back. There's no DNA in sweat. They want to keep saying sweat DNA. It isn't. There's no DNA in sweat. Now, your sweat can carry skin particles and drop that on there, and that's where you're going to get the DNA. But sweat itself, there is no DNA in that. Hood latch came from the groin swab. There's plenty of evidence that have been found after trial. Bobby's phone pinged off the same area that Teresa's was. Bobby was the only one home for when those searches were made on the computer, but he claimed he was sleeping, yet somebody's using the computer when he's the only one home. Barb says that Bobby told her he saw Teresa Halbach leave. Blaine admits he lied about seeing Stephen at a fire. Dietering told Barb not to give Bobby's computer to Kathleen Zellner. That computer had mass deletions on it. The gravel pit bones that we don't even know if they're human. We're not going to talk about these bones. They gave to the Halbach family. So those are some of the notes that I have in there. And I mean, I've got tons of notes like crazy all over the place because I have been interested in this case since it came out. I did not know anything about this case prior to Making a Murderer. But as I said earlier in this video, that this is the 5-year anniversary of Making a Murderer. It came out this weekend, 5 years ago. I happened to watch it the weekend it came out. I did not know anything about it. I was home alone. It had snowed here, and my partner plows when it snows, and so he was gone, and I was here by myself, and I like true crime, so I watched it, not knowing anything at all. So it wasn't the big hit sensation yet. And it, there, so I know nothing of what's going to happen. So I watched the first episode. And for the first episode, it's like, wow, that really, that's awful. And then when the second episode starts and they're still talking about Steven, I remember clear as day pausing it because I was assuming, because the first episode sums it all up. Steven, the whole Penny Bernstein thing and him being in prison and he gets out and all that stuff. And so I'm like, why is the next episode still on this case? So, because I'm assuming it then is going to be a bunch of cases, right? And so I had paused it and I was like, what is going on? This is weird. And so then as I'm playing it, I'm like, oh no, did this guy now seriously kill somebody after, being in prison and everything that was done to him? So I still know absolutely nothing about it. I couldn't stop it. I binge watched all the episodes in one day. And then when my partner was home and had the time, I'm like, you need to watch this. And so I watched it a second time with him, and he too watched it straight through. When I was done watching it, I was like, okay, this happened in 2005 through 2007, and it's 2015. Where is this case now? Because I'm in a Chicago suburb, so I'm not far from there, and I had never seen anything about this on the news or anything. So I'm like, where is this case now? And I want to know more. So that's when you fall down the rabbit hole. And why I get so annoyed when guilters will say people like myself that believe in their innocence are just swayed by a TV show. I'm not swayed by a TV show. I then had to seek out and read everything I could find on this case. I had never been to Reddit before, never even heard of Reddit. Went to Reddit and reading that stuff. And at that time, too, there was somebody on Reddit who wanted to raise funds to get all the items from the case, all the documents, all the transcripts, all the tapes, everything. And so I donated money to that, which you can see if you go to the website that all that stuff got put up on, StephenAveryCase. Is it com or org? I always forget which one is good and which one's bad. You'll see when it acknowledges the people who paid the money for it. I'm listed in there because I just needed it all. I had to read it all. Where is this case? Steven and Brendan were nothing to me. I don't know these people. It doesn't affect me one way or another if they are guilty or innocent. I just wanted to know what was going on with this case. And the deeper I dug, the more inconsistencies you find. And that it is clear that Steven was framed. And the way I believe this went down is they want to get rid of Steven because of the $36 million suit. Because they absolutely put that poor guy away for nothing. They're all going to be liable for it individually. It's not just, insurance company had already said the insurance company was not going to cover the law enforcement that did this to him. So they need to get rid of Steven. I do not believe it was a conspiracy by the cops to even get Teresa Halbach there. I do not believe the cops killed Teresa Halbach. Now, if evidence came out to show they did it, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm totally shocked by that. I believe that this was just taking advantage that Teresa Halbach had been there that day and disappeared, and now we're going to make these pieces fit for it to be Stephen, so we can get rid of him one way or another. Stephen was with Brendan Dassey that night. So Brendan is his alibi. So now what I believe law enforcement did with Brendan initially is they just wanted Brendan to be able to say that Stephen was by himself for periods of time, or that Brendan saw something suspicious. They wanted to use Brendan to make Stephen guilty. But that Brendan didn't understand what they were trying to get him to say. So instead, it makes it so Brendan has to go down with Stephen. So that's how it becomes that Brendan is an accessory. Now, I do not believe, or let me scroll up a minute, coincidence that she was killed. I believe Bobby Dassey was obsessed with Teresa Halbach, that he has a warped mind. I believe that day Bobby Dassey tried to initially stop Teresa Halbach by a hustle shot. What happened then? I don't know. I don't know if he made a physical pass at her that she denied. Did he just ask her out and she just kind of laughed, that this boy, she's older than him, don't know. Because there's no evidence. There is no evidence to what happened to Teresa Halbach. I do not believe she's alive, but it's another thing of if she was still alive, it's like, oh, she's still alive. But so I don't think it's a coincidence that she was killed. I think Bobby Dassey, something didn't go right there, and Bobby Dassey killed her or did something to her. What he did to her, I don't know. Did he rape her? Don't know. Did he shoot her? Don't know. Did he stab her? Don't know. Because there is no evidence of whatever happened to Teresa Halbach. I just believe her being missing is the result of something that Bobby Dassey did to her. And then I have to believe that Scott Taddock is a part of it because Scott Taddock and Bobby are awfully close. Scott doesn't get along with any of the other of Barb's kids, but Bobby. And they're each other's alibis. Oh, we saw each other driving, going the opposite directions. And then Scott Taddock is lying about seeing the fire and what size the fire is. So I believe it was Bobby Dassey with an assist from Scott Taddock. What all Scott's involvement is, don't know. Okay, so Homer's asking, why did Colburn make the call to dispatch, then not seize the car? Instead, he planted it to be found. Because this is where law enforcement is also, they are seizing the opportunity to now make this be Stephen. Since she had been at the Avery salvage yard that day. It could have even initially started with them thinking Stephen was guilty. But now when we find this car not on salvage yard, we need to make sure it's there. Because, all right, so I believe, I believe that Scott Blodorn, Ryan Hilgas, and Michael Halbach are part of planting the RAV4 at the salvage yard. I believe that the car was found at the turnaround. Law enforcement wants to get that to Avery Salvage Yard to be the nail in the coffin for Stephen. So they tell those boys that due to the Penny Bernstein case, they're never going to be able to get Teresa's killer, that Stephen is going to walk for what he did to Teresa Halbach unless they can get that vehicle there. So I think those three boys assisted with the planting of the car because they wanted to bolster the state's case against Stephen. Those boys have no reason not to believe law enforcement. They have every reason to want whoever did whatever it was that was done to Teresa, they want them to pay for it. They don't want Stephen to walk clean. So I believe those three boys gave them access to her valet key that was at the house. So the car could be moved without it looking like the car was broken into and, that they had to hotwire it to drive it, because they can't throw it on a tow truck and pull it through there, it would be obvious. So they needed the key. And I believe those three boys helped them with that. Were those three boys part of getting the car physically to the salvage yard? I don't know. But they're the ones that got the key. And then her day planner is found on the passenger seat in the car, where she had handwritten something that... What is this in my notes? What time was that at? 11:35 a.m. is when Teresa had talked to the person on the phone that she made the notes in that day planner that Ryan Hilgas had. Ryan Hilgas was able to just guess her password to then delete voicemails because her mailbox was full, then it wasn't. So somebody deleted voicemails. Why? Don't know. Bobby Dassey is who I believed is responsible for the disappearance of Teresa Halbach. I believe he had the motive. He had the opportunity. And he lies and lies and lies. I believe law enforcement needs Stephen to go away so they can get out of that lawsuit. I do not believe law enforcement killed Teresa Halbach to frame Stephen for this. But it's another thing of if evidence came out to point that way, I'd be like, okay, I was wrong. The only thing I can be 100% sure of is that Stephen and Brendan are innocent. I can look at evidence and see where those pieces fit more than likely. You can see where law enforcement lies. Who doesn't lie? Stephen. Stephen is the only person in this case not lying about something. Brendan Dassey, lying. He's manipulated into lying. Stephen is the only one telling the truth. The timelines just don't add up. Period. There is no way the bus driver saw Teresa Halbach there on October 31st, 2005, taking pictures of that red van. Where she stops the bus and where that car was parked, there's no way for her to be able to see a person. So that time doesn't work. And when you're saying you're having they've said other kids on the bus said they saw her too. Nobody could have seen her from the school bus. Where they could have seen her is every other time when Stephen was selling a car, it was parked down by the bus stop at the office of the salvage yard. Well, the bus drives right by that, so they could see her down there taking pictures. There's no way they saw Teresa Halbach that day. Another lie. I do not blame the bus driver for that lie, because the bus driver said from the get-go that she doesn't know for sure what day it was. But nobody has asked her where she saw that car. She's just saying she saw it there on salvage yard. They're not asking her if she saw it down by Barb's house, which there's no way she could see that far from the bus stop. The bus doesn't go down to the house. The bus turns around at the office, which is like a quarter mile away. I have a video I've done that proves there's no way you can see anybody down where that van was parked from the bus stop. It's not possible. Didn't happen. Stephen was not liked by law enforcement. The family's not liked by a lot of people in town. Really didn't like Stephen when he got released from the Penny Bernstein thing, all the attention he was getting. You know, they were doing the Avery law, and there he is on the news, and really bothered Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Colborn, I'm convinced, was so close to cracking. I think if those depositions had been allowed to continue, if this whole thing hadn't happened, he would have either just full out confessed or he just would have completely screwed up. Because Colborn's the one was told years prior they had the wrong person in jail for the Penny Bernstein case, and he just ignored it. Why are all those people that are involved in the Penny Bernstein case having anything to do with this one? Sherry Culhane. She was given the DNA in the Bernstein case, and she put it off for a long, long time. Extra time Stephen had to be in prison before she did the testing, and then she sat on that as well. Anything to milk the amount of time for Stephen to be in prison. Then she's used on this case, where she is told, put Teresa in his trailer or garage. That's not suspicious at all, is it? They didn't allow the coroner on the scene. The coroner outranks all of them. Yet she wasn't allowed on the scene. Why? Because of a prior case that they wanted her to lie and she refused. Then they ran her out of the job. So I totally understand people being afraid to speak out against Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Because look what they've done to Stephen. Not once, but twice. Look what they did to the coroner. She lost her job. There is zero untainted evidence to say Stephen Avery did this. And I have no reason to be here these 5 years declaring his innocence. If Stephen were guilty, I would say he was guilty. If I declared his innocence and then later find out, get evidence that shows he's guilty, I would say as much. Because I get nothing one way or another out of this. Actually, by me being part of this case in any way, I get so much grief. I get mercilessly attacked over the years. I have had some horrible things done to me just for maintaining Stephen's innocence. Cops called on me. Attorney General called on me. I have Stephen's family hates me. Why does Stephen's family hate me? Well, because I don't just give the family a pass. They want people to not look at Bobby Dassey. Leave Bobby alone. No, Bobby's guilty. And I will continue to say so until evidence shows me another way. All the evidence points to Bobby Dassey. So I don't care who likes me or who doesn't. I will continue on here at Stephen Avery Project and MAM Gossip and follow this case and declare Stephen and Brendan's innocence. It is so sad what has happened to those two men. They took Stephen the first time when he was 22. His twin boys had just been born. By locking him away, he lost his wife. He lost his children. To this day, most of his children have nothing to do with him because they have been raised by someone telling them awful things about their father. Then he finally gets out, starts to make a life for himself, living with his girlfriend that he loves. The people who put him away for 18 years, you absolutely need to make them pay for it. Absolutely. So they do it to him again. This time, they up it. Now it's murder, not just attempted rape. People forget that part too in the Penny Bernstein case. She was not raped. She was beaten, and the guy attempted to rape her, but wasn't able to. Brendan, 16-year-old kid. Sweet kid. Just wants to play video games. Watch wrestling. Oh my gosh, Homer. Would I date Stephen if he was released? Absolutely not. Let me touch on that for a minute. When I first took over Stephen Avery Project, because the man who founded Stephen Avery Project decided, after the way the Avery family attacked him for just having this page, that he couldn't deal with it anymore. And so he just had to go, move on from this case. He was married and had a young child, and his wife was pregnant with another. And they did horrible, horrible things to him. And the people who were the moderators for him on Stephen Avery Project at that time recommended that I take over this page. So when this man, who at that time was regularly visiting Stephen, because he's somebody who lives in the area in Wisconsin, so he would go visit Stephen regularly. So when he went to visit Stephen, he had let him know that he was moving on and that I was taking over the page, and he gave Stephen my contact information. So Stephen could then reach out to me, because Stephen Avery Project was the very first support page for Stephen. It was started in December of 2015, right after Making a Murderer came out. It is the first, and it is the biggest support page. And he didn't want that to just fall apart. He still believed in Stephen's innocence and wanted there to be help for Stephen, and his moderators felt that I would be the best person who was involved in the case to carry the ball. So Stephen then called me from prison, and one of the very first things I said to Stephen is, I'm not looking to date you. I know how many women reach out to Stephen and to Brendan. They're in love with him and, send pictures and all that kind of stuff. And Stephen likes it a lot, because Stephen just wants to be in love. He wants a family, he wants a wife, he wants kids, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with Stephen liking the attention he gets from women, because he really does just want to be married and have a family. He wants to love someone, and he wants to be loved. But I was not going to give him any kind of false impression on who I was and what I was doing. So I told him from the get-go, I'm not looking to date you. I'm not. I do not. I have no desire to be Mrs. Stephen Avery. Now, I did used to visit Stephen. So that's my very first visit with Stephen, right? Yes. That's my very first visit with Stephen, because I'm wearing a shirt that says Free Melissa. Melissa Kaluzinski, which that's Melissa Kaluzinski. Well, actually, I'll show this one. Because what I did is, when I went to visit Stephen, I wore the Melissa Kaluzinski shirt. And then when I went to visit Melissa, I wore Injustice Avery wear shirt. So Melissa Kaluzinski is another case of Kathleen Zellner's, and it's a local case for me. And before COVID, I would go to visit Melissa often, and now I email with her all the time. So I have two pictures from that first visit with Stephen where I'm wearing the Free Melissa shirt. And you can see I'm like, because Stephen's a wee little lad. And I'm 5'7", so I'm kind of slouching down here because otherwise I tower over him. So I believe this is the first picture. All right, this picture is dated March 11th, 2019. But Stephen mailed me this picture that he wrote, "Love my supporters," that he wanted me posting on Stephen Avery Project. So, and then Here's another visit I had with Steven. And so took one picture of us together, and then he also wanted me taking one picture of just him to put on Stephen Avery Project. So I used to visit with him. What are those pictures? Okay, those are all the Stephen pictures. So here's another picture of me with Melissa. And there's Melissa. No, Homer, not just anyone can go visit him. You have to have Steven's permission, and then there's also paperwork that needs to be filled out to go on a visit. And he's only allowed X amount of people on his list to visit him. And Steven and I have had ups and downs. Steven currently doesn't like me or talks to me because Avery family lied to him about me. The Avery family is really, really against me, which, whatever. I don't really care. I'm not here to be friends with the Avery family, even though once upon a time I was. But then when stories aren't adding up and things are going on, I have to go where the evidence leads, right? So Carol Ann had already commented about COVID, and then here's somebody else asking about COVID. There has been no visits to any prisons in the States since March due to COVID. So nobody can visit them. They are still able to make phone calls. Some inmates are able to email. Steven's not somebody who particularly likes to email, but Melissa Kaluzinski and I email multiple times a day. Kathleen Zellner has tweeted about she's done Zoom meetings with Steven recently. And Melissa said there's a possibility that she'll be doing a Zoom meeting with Kathleen at some point too, which would, I really hope for that. Because when you're in lockdown, that you're locked down like this all these months and you're not being able to have contact with your loved ones, even if it's just a Zoom call with your lawyer, it's something to break up your day. So I don't think Kathleen should have to have something going on with the case to Zoom meet with her clients. Just give them a little boost of seeing somebody and talking to somebody, even if you're just going to talk about the weather, something to get them out of this. And that also brings me to something that Christopher wanted me to address with you all today is you can still send Christmas cards if you wanted to both Stephen and Brendan. Christopher has posted on Stephen Avery Project and its miscellaneous other places where the addresses are that you can send a card or a letter to Stephen and or Brendan or Melissa if you would like. Let us know if you would like to reach out to Melissa, because Melissa's I always say Melissa's my heart. I love that girl so much. So you can still send them a Christmas card or a letter. The thing that I always ask people, though, if you are going to write to Stephen and Brendan, do not do it because you just think you're writing to a famous person and you want a letter back from them. They're not going to write back to everybody. Stephen doesn't write back to very many people at all. Stephen's been burned, quite honestly, by people who have then gone to tabloids overseas and sold letters and make stuff up, and like the guy hasn't been through enough. So don't do it because you're looking for something for yourself. Write to them or send them a card because you just want to brighten their day. And if you are writing them a letter, don't make it all about their case. and ask them things about their case. Now, Stephen especially will talk about his case. Stephen has told me things on both the phone and in person about the case that he probably shouldn't have. Nothing negative, because again, if Stephen had said something to make it out like he was guilty, I wouldn't be supporting him. Okay. But he's not supposed to talk about his case. Don't try to trick him into telling you things about his case. Just talk to him about yourself, who you are, that you support him, you believe in his innocence, and tell him where you live and what you like. If you're Brendan, or if you're writing to Brendan really likes like poetry, and he likes jokes. You know, Brendan has written his own poems. You know, so you could share your favorite poem with Brendan. You could write him some silly jokes. I've done that in the past. I've got a book too. I've got bookcases all up here. I bought a book back from when I used to talk to Brendan, so I could read him some of the jokes out of the book when I would talk to him. Brendan really likes music and wrestling and video games. So talk to Brendan about what's your favorite bands, what's your favorite songs, tell him about concerts you've been to. If you're into wrestling, talk to him about wrestling, all that kind, so do that. Don't make it about their case. They live their case every day being locked up in prison. So don't obsess on that. Don't write to them just to bring them down. And don't write to them, because we've had people in the past who will complain that Stephen never wrote back to them. Well, he shouldn't have to. So please do write them a letter. Show them support. It's something small you can do. In Stephen's case, there will be people who, you want to help and you don't know how. You can always put money on his commissary account or to Kathleen for his legal defense. So let me pull up over here. When you go to Kathleen's website, she has a page that is just on Stephen. So let me get that link, which, this always bothers me. All right. Let's comment on this real fast now that this is in my face. So there's the link to that. That picture that Kathleen Zellner has up for her Stephen section has Stephen in the middle in the orange prison jumpsuit. There is a woman deputy from Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department to Stephen's right. And then there is a man deputy to his left. If you zoom in on that picture, you will see the name tag on that male deputy. His last name is Wardman. Why is that significant? That man's father was on Stephen's jury. If you Google Carl Wardman, Manitowoc, you will see a picture of a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department community service vehicle or whatever it is. Two men in the car. Well, the doors are open, and so the guys in uniform are leaning out of the car, like standing out of the car. This man's father is one of those men. Worked for Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. So this man worked for Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, and his son is a deputy for Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, and he's on Stephen's jury. Doesn't that piss you off? How is that a fair trial? there is no way Stephen would get a fair trial. There is no way Stephen would have been found innocent. Because no matter what, Carl Wardsman was going to say guilty. So there was going to be at least one person saying guilty. Oh, there's so many things wrong with this case. And I talked to Jerry Buting about this because when Brendan's case was at the 7th Circuit, that's here in Chicago. And so I went to the hearing, and Jerry Buting went to one of them. And I talked to Buting outside of court, and I asked him, because lawyers are given X amount of strikes when you're going through the jury pool, that you can say, no, we don't want this person. No questions asked. The other side can't even argue it. But you're only limited to so many. And I said to Buting, why would you let Carl Wardsman be on that jury? And Carl Wardsman isn't the only person who was affiliated with Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department that was on that jury. There's a second person who was married to a deputy that was also on there. So there was going to be 2 people who were going to be on that jury that work for Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. But when I asked Buting, why would you allow Wardsman on that jury? His answer to me was, there were so many others that were worse. So, this is another thing on Stephen not getting a fair trial. They stacked that jury pool, that there was no way around it, that you were going to have people on Stephen's jury that were going to find him guilty. But back to what I was saying is, so I posted you that link. When you're on the page for Steven Avery, and by the way, when you're on that page, when you look to the left, she lists her cases. So the first case she's got listed is Steven Avery. The second one is Mario Casaro, however you say that. Then the third case is Melissa Kaluzinski, who I was showing you the pictures of. So if you want to learn more about Melissa Kaluzinski's case, you can go on Kathleen's website and go see what she's got up there for Melissa's case. But so when you scroll down on Kathleen's website on this case, this is where I got the link for where we went over the reply brief that was filed in June of this year that we're still waiting for the response on. Then she's also got a link where you can see the appellate brief that she filed the year before that. But then underneath it is, to support the Steven Avery Legal Defense Fund, please donate here. And a button you can click for that. So let me click on that, and where is that bringing me? It's bringing to a PayPal account for Kathleen T. Zellner and Associates. Let me put this link here. And I have done this in the past where I have shared this link, and then the family has accused me of like doctoring it so that really it would go to something that would pay me. You can see this all on the Up and Up, that's how you would donate money that goes to his legal defense. So that's money that goes directly to Kathleen Zellner. But I have also advised people, like when you feel sorry for Stephen's parents and you want to help Dolores, if you wanted to send money to Dolores, I advise people to send it to this PayPal for Kathleen Zellner, and just make a note of it and tell Kathleen Zellner it's for Dolores. She's going to give it to Dolores. Then when you scroll down a little bit more, there is a link for how to put money on Stephen's commissary. So there is that link right there that you then have to make an account and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. But that's where you can find it if you wanted to do something financial. Those are the only things that we recommend you doing if you wanted to throw money at this case. only places. There have been many GoFundMe's made over the years that will act like it's going here or there. Everything is suspect. There's been so many shady things that have happened. So do it all through Kathleen Zellner's website, please. Those are on the up and up. Put it directly in his commissary account. And there'll be people who will want to send Stephen things, or Brendan things, but inmates are only allowed X amount of things in their cells at a time. So, but they can have as much money as you put in their accounts. The only problem with putting a lot of money in their account is like Brendan is somebody who's been manipulated before, and somebody got his PIN number, and they'll steal money out of somebody's account. So the more money that's in there, the more money there is for people to steal out of your account. But I still am telling you, and instead of, unless they ask for something specifically, like Melissa has asked me for specific books. So, and I see Carol Ann asking about current GoFundMe's. I haven't heard any current GoFundMe's, but family GoFundMe's. Don't give to family GoFundMe's. But Carol Ann is somebody who recently sent a book to Melissa Kaluzinski. I do not advise people to just buy books for inmates and send them to them. But Melissa specifically asked me for books. So that's what Carol Ann did with Melissa, is you're sending something that Melissa has asked for. She knows it. She's expecting it's coming. So that's why it's just easier if you put stuff on their commissary instead of, I want to buy Stephen a pair of socks, I'm going to send him a pair of socks. You're not sure what they can have. So send him the money and he can use it how he wants. And he can also take money out of it to then send to his mom if he wants. So do it that way. Yes, their addresses have been posted. They're on a pin post here on Stephen Avery Project to send letters to Stephen and Brendan. So, and I'm sure Christopher, who's moderating all of this, will get that posted for you all again to so you have it up to date. Also on Kathleen's page, when you scroll down after the ways to donate, she lists recent press. So there are clickable links that are there that you can go see what she has posted as the latest stories to come out. But these aren't really the most recent, but they are things that when you're looking for things to look into the case on, you can go into these. So Kathleen's website is an excellent resource. We're coming up to the end of, I'm surprised that when I saw that we had this big block of time that I was supposed to talk about these things, going, am I going to be able to fill up all that time? I mean, I know I'm somebody who talks a whole lot, but I'm like, will I be able to talk that much? But yes, I have. So I think we're going to end this a little bit early, where now we're going into a little break time that I can have lunch or whatever before we go live again. So we're scheduled to go live again at 1 p.m. Central. So we're currently at 11:40 a.m. Central Time. So in about an hour and a half is when I would be going live again, where we're going to start with Christopher is going to be on with me. Christopher is a moderator here, and he is the one that came up with this whole idea to have this Christmas rally, this holiday rally for Stephen and Brendan. So you'll get to speak with Christopher, and then Christopher wants to talk to me more about my affiliation with the case. And something that I'm possibly going to do is read you some letters that I have received from Stephen and Brendan from years ago, back when I used to talk with them. So that may happen. And I'll also share with you, I've written some articles over the years about the cases, and we'll talk about those as well. So that will be, like I said, at 1 p.m. Central Time. So in about an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm going to leave you now. And hopefully, when we come back, we won't have the issues with the video like we've had today. I'll also be coming through on Zoom as opposed to just directly through Facebook. So Christopher can be on the screen also. So go to the bathroom and have a snack, and we'll see you in an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you all. Investigation continues.